Commander Velcris thought humans were fragile newcomers, until he watched one walk through 8 gravities while everyone else was dying. Commander Velcris of the Thing Collective had seen many species come through Research Station Pinnacle 7 in his 12 cycles of service. The tall, the short, the scaled, the feathered, the ones who breathed methane and had to wear suits everywhere. He prided himself on being accommodating to all of them. Professional, efficient, but humans were in his carefully considered opinion, a bit of a joke. Not that he would say it out loud, of course. That would be unprofessional. But here he was, standing in the main operations hub of Pinnacle 7, watching the newest member of his crew float past the observation window in his maintenance suit, and all Velcris could think was, really, this is what the Galactic Union thinks is worth recruiting. The human, Jackson Reed, according to his personnel file, was average height for his species, brown hair, dark eyes, that strange flat face humans had with the tiny little nose that looked like it could barely filter air properly. He moved with the kind of lazy confidence that suggested he had no idea how dangerous deep space actually was. Velcris's mandibles clicked together in what might have been a sigh if his species had lungs. "Commander, the gravitational sensors are picking up some unusual fluctuations near Grid 7, chirped Nista, the Corv communications officer. Her 4 eyes blinked in sequence, 2 on each side of her narrow head. The Corv were excellent at monitoring systems. Their reaction times were 3 times faster than most species. Should I log it for the research team?" "How unusual?" Velcris asked, not looking away from the window. Jackson was doing something to the external sensor array, probably calibrating it wrong. Humans were so new to space travel, barely 200 cycles since first contact. What could they possibly know about maintaining delicate scientific equipment? 0.03% variance from baseline, Nista replied. "It is within normal parameters for this sector, but technically worth noting." "Log it," Velcris said with a wave of one of his forearms. The other 3 were busy manipulating holographic displays, checking the station's systems. Everything was running smoothly, as it should be. Pinnacle 7 was positioned exactly 1.2 million kilometers from a neutron star cluster, close enough to study the gravitational phenomena but far enough to be safe, theoretically. "Anything else?" "The human finished the external maintenance ahead of schedule," Nista said, and there was something in her tone that might have been surprise. "He is requesting permission to come back inside." "Granted," Velcris said. Of course the human finished early. He probably did a terrible job. Humans were known for rushing things, for being impatient. Their entire civilization had gone from primitive combustion engines to faster-than-light travel in less than 300 cycles. That kind of speed spoke to recklessness, not intelligence. Pinnacle 7 was home to 47 crew members from 17 different species, all dedicated to studying the most extreme gravitational environments in charted space. The station itself was a marvel of engineering, a rotating wheel design that generated a comfortable 0.4 gravities through spin. Perfect for most species. The thing came from a low-gravity moon, so anything above 0.5 made Velcris feel sluggish and compressed. Most of the other crew members felt the same way. Comfortable, safe, scientifically productive. The airlock cycled, and Jackson came through, pulling off his helmet with movements that looked almost aggressive to Velcris's eyes. Humans were always so forceful with everything they touched. "Hey, Commander," Jackson said, his voice carrying that strange tonal quality humans called an accent. This one was from some region on Earth called the Pacific Northwest, if Velcris remembered correctly. Not that it mattered. External sensors are all calibrated. Should be getting clearer readings on the neutron cluster now. Maybe 15% improvement on resolution. "You finished in half the estimated time," Velcris said, his translator rendering his clicking speech into flat galactic common. "Are you certain you completed all the necessary checks?" Jackson grinned, showing his flat little teeth. Humans smiled when they were happy. Velcris had learned. It looked vaguely threatening. "Yeah, man, I am sure. It was not exactly complicated. Just some sensor realignment and a couple of loose mounting brackets. Easy stuff." Easy. Of course the human thought precision astrophysics equipment maintenance was easy. "Very well," Velcris said stiffly. "Report to Engineering Bay 3. Chief Foreign has a list of internal repairs that need attention." "You got it, boss," Jackson said, and he actually saluted, which was not part of any Galactic Union protocol. Then he pushed off toward the corridor with too much force, clearly still adjusting to the low gravity. Humans came from a heavy gravity world, Velcris knew. 0.4 probably felt like floating to them. Across the operations hub, Drummeth the Cathari let out a low rumble. The massive rock-like being rarely spoke unless necessary. The human works quickly. Too quickly, Valkyris muttered. We will probably have to redo everything he touched. But even as he said it, the sensor displays updated with noticeably clearer data from the neutron cluster. Valkyris's mandibles twitched in irritation. Fine, so maybe the human was not completely incompetent. Commander, those gravitational fluctuations are increasing, Nista said, her tone still calm. Now at 0.07% variance. Still within normal range? Valkyris asked. Yes, sir. Well within. Continue monitoring, Valkyris said. Gravitational fluctuations were constant in this sector. That was literally why they were here. Small variations meant nothing. Just the natural chaos of neutron stars doing their thing, bending space-time into interesting shapes. He had no idea that in 6 hours, those small fluctuations would turn into a nightmare that would test every crew member's will to survive. And he certainly had no idea that the one being he had just dismissed as reckless and incompetent would be the only reason any of them lived through it. But that was the thing about humans, wasn't it? They were always surprising people, usually at the worst possible moment. The alarm started screaming at 0300 station time, which was in Valkyris's opinion the absolute worst time for alarms to start screaming. He jolted awake in his rest chamber, all four arms flailing, and immediately knew something was catastrophically wrong. The gravity felt wrong, pulling at him with fluctuating intensity, like the station's spin was hiccuping. 0.4 gravities, then 0.6, then 0.3, then suddenly, horrifyingly, 0.9. All crew to emergency stations, he gasped into his comm unit, trying to pull himself out of his sleeping harness. His exoskeleton creaked under the shifting weight. Nista, report. What is happening? The response came through broken with static. Gravitational anomaly, Commander. It is not like anything in the records. The neutron cluster. Something changed. The waves are, oh ancestors. Hold on. The gravity spiked to 1.2. Valkyris felt his carapace compress, felt his internal organs shift in ways they were never meant to shift. Pain lanced through his thorax. The Thin had evolved on a moon with 0.2 gravities. Anything above 0.6 was dangerous. Anything above 1 was potentially lethal. He dragged himself toward the door, each movement an agony, and made it to the corridor just as the gravity dropped to 0.3 again. The sudden relief made him gasp, but he knew it would not last. Through the station's interior windows he could see the neutron cluster, and it was doing something impossible. The stars around it were bending, warping, and waves of gravitational distortion were radiating outward like ripples in water, straight toward Pinnacle 7. Emergency stabilizers, he wheezed into the comm. Engage all our inertial dampeners. Get us out of. The gravity hit 2.8. Valkyris collapsed. Just dropped like his legs had been cut off. His breathing spiracles seized. Unable to process the weight of his own body crushing down on them. Through the pain, he heard screaming on the comm, heard the sickening crack of Nista's exoskeleton breaking, heard Drummeth's rumbling groan as even the rock-like Cathari struggled under the impossible pull. Somewhere in the distance, something exploded. Life support maybe, or the reactor containment field. Did it matter? They were all going to die, crushed under the weight of a universe that had decided physics was just a suggestion. The gravity dropped to 0.7. Valkyris sucked in air, tried to move, tried to think. His command training kicked in through the haze of pain and terror. Damage report. Anyone. Someone. Commander. It was Vorn from engineering, and the chief engineer sounded like she was crying. Her species, the Silith, were even more fragile than the Thin. We have lost containment on decks 4 and 5. The dampeners cannot handle these fluctuations. Gravity is spiking between 0.5 and we just registered 4.2 gravities. 4.2. That will kill most of the crew. 4.2 gravities. Valkyris had never experienced anything above 1.5, and that had been in a controlled environment with medical supervision. This was not controlled. This was chaos, random, pulsing waves of gravitational force that were tearing the station apart. Evacuate to the core sections, he managed. Get everyone, wait. The gravity hit 5.3. Valkyris blacked out for a moment. When his vision came back, he was lying on the floor, certain that something inside him had ruptured. He could not feel two of his arms. The pain was so intense it had wrapped back around to a kind of cold numbness. And then he heard footsteps, regular, steady footsteps. Someone was walking through the corridor like they were taking a casual stroll through a park. Whoa. Okay. This is getting pretty intense, a voice said. Jackson Reed's voice. The human appeared in Velcris's blurred vision, moving at a normal pace, actually stepping over debris with the kind of annoyed expression someone might have when dealing with a minor inconvenience. Commander, you look pretty rough. Hang on. The gravity was at 5 gravities. 5. And the human was walking. Jackson grabbed Velcris with those strange 5-fingered hands and lifted him. Just lifted him. Like he weighed nothing. Let me get you to the medical bay, yeah? This storm is pretty wild. Feels like I am back in Seattle during an earthquake. Honestly. How? Velcris wheezed. How are you? You should be. You cannot. Oh right. You guys are all from Low G Worlds, Jackson said, actually jogging now, carrying Velcris like he was a small package. The gravity spiked to 6.1. Jackson stumbled slightly but kept moving. Yeah. So, Earth is 1 gravity baseline. I have been dealing with this my whole life. 6 Gs is rough, don't get me wrong, but I can handle it for a bit. You good? You look not good. Not good. That was an understatement. Velcris felt like he was dying, but the human just kept moving, kept talking in that casual, almost amused tone. They passed a viewport and Velcris saw the nightmare outside. The station was tumbling through gravitational waves, each one hitting like a physical blow. The hull was groaning, metal shrieking as it bent and twisted. Through the chaos he could see other crew members, the ones who had tried to evacuate. Most were not moving. Some were definitely not alive anymore. The gravity dropped to 2.1, then immediately spiked to 7.4. Jackson grunted. Actually grunted, like someone had poked him mildly hard in the ribs. Okay, yeah, that one hurt. Hold tight, Commander. We are almost to medical. And then I gotta go check on the reactor before this whole place turns into a very expensive piece of scrap metal. Check on the reactor. In 7 gravities. The human was planning to check on the reactor in 7 gravities. Velcris would have laughed if he could breathe. You are insane, he managed to whisper. Jackson grinned down at him. That flat-toothed human grin.
Nah, man.
I am just having a bad day. You wanna see insane? Try being a delivery driver in downtown Portland during rush hour. Now that is terrifying. The gravity hit 8.2, and Jackson finally went down to one knee, but he did not drop Velcris. He just held on, muscles straining, sweat pouring down his face, and kept that same ridiculous grin. Feels like home, Jackson said, and Velcris realized with absolute horror that the human meant it. Medical bay was a disaster zone. Equipment had torn loose from the walls during the gravity spikes, and 3 crew members were already there in various states of crushed prophylaxis. A Quoven with 6 delicate limbs was trying desperately to treat them while simultaneously trying not to die herself. Her species came from a world with 0.15 gravities. She looked like a broken toy. Jackson set Velcris down on a medical platform with surprising gentleness, then immediately turned to Phylaxis. Doc, you need to get into a support harness. Now, you are going to break every bone in your body if another big wave hits. I cannot. I have patients, Phylaxis wheezed, her translator barely functioning. You have patients who will definitely die if their doctor gets pancaked, Jackson said, already moving to help her into one of the emergency pressure suits designed for high G operations. Come on, work with me here. Arms in. Yeah, that is it. This thing will keep you from folding in half. The gravity fluctuated to 3.7. Jackson swayed but stayed upright. Phylaxis would have collapsed if he had not been holding her steady. How are you doing this? She whispered. Practice, Jackson said with a shrug. Okay, I am going to hit the reactor room. Make sure we still have a station to die on. Commander, you stay here. Try not to break anything else. Doc, keep everyone stable. I will be back. Wait, Velcris managed to croak. His vision was clearing slightly now that the gravity had stabilized at a merely agonizing 3.7. You cannot. The reactor core is 4 decks down. You will never make it. Jackson was already at the door. Watch me. And then he was gone, running through corridors that were actively trying to kill him. Velcris pulled himself up slightly on the medical platform, ignoring the screaming protest from his body, and watched through the medical bay's external monitors. He had access to the station's internal cameras from here, and what he saw defied every logical understanding of biology he possessed. Jackson was sprinting through Deck 3, where the gravity had hit 6.5. Sprinting. Other crew members were visible in the corridors, Friendlic engineers, Corv technicians, all of them motionless, either unconscious or dead. Jackson stopped at each one, checked for life signs with quick efficiency, then kept moving. When he found someone alive, he picked them up, carried them to the nearest safe room, sealed the door and continued on. This is so much worse than that time I went hiking in Colorado, Jackson muttered to himself, clearly unaware his comm was still broadcasting to the bridge. At least then I just had altitude sickness. This is like altitude sickness's angry older brother who lifts weights. The gravity spiked to 7.8. Jackson dropped to a crouch, wrote it out with gritted teeth, then stood back up when it dropped to 5.2. Okay, yeah, that one was spicy. Note to self, do more deadlifts if I get back to Earth. He reached Engineering Bay 2, where Vorn was trapped under a collapsed support beam. The Silith chief engineer was barely conscious, her crystalline body structure cracked in a dozen places. Hey chief, bad news, your engineering bay looks like it got into a fight with a black hole, Jackson said, kneeling beside her. Good news, I am here to ruin the black hole's day. This is going to hurt. Ready? He lifted the support beam. Just lifted it. In 5.2 gravities. Velcris watched the muscles in the human's arms and back strain, watched his face turn red with effort, but he lifted it. He pulled Vorn free, checked her over with the same quick efficiency, then activated her emergency stasis field. You are staying right here until the gravity stops being absolutely ridiculous, Jackson told her unconscious form. Do not go anywhere. Not that you could, but, just in case you were planning on it. The gravity dropped to 4.1. Jackson used the opportunity to move faster, heading deeper into the station. He reached the reactor level just as another massive spike hit. 8.3 gravities, the highest yet. Velcris watched in absolute horror as Jackson went down but not out. The human was on his hands and knees, crawling toward the reactor controls, every movement clearly agony. Come on, Reed. You have done worse, Jackson grunted to himself. Remember that time you had to change a tire on the side of the highway in the rain? This is just like that, except with more exotic matter and a higher chance of immediate death. He reached the control panel, pulled himself up using the console for leverage, and started working. His hands were shaking, but they were moving, adjusting parameters, rerouting power, doing things that required fine motor control while being crushed under 8 times normal Earth gravity. Okay, inertial dampeners are fried, no surprise there, he muttered, talking himself through it. Reactor containment is holding, barely. If I shunt power from life support deck 6, nobody is there anyway. Redirect it to structural integrity fields. That might work. Come on, baby. Do not explode on me now. The station shuddered. The gravitational waves were still pounding them, but something changed. The internal gravity stabilized at 4.0, still crushing for most species, but no longer randomly spiking into instantly lethal territory. Jackson had done it. He had actually done it. Reactor stable, sort of, Jackson announced over the comm. We are still getting hit by the storm, but I managed to reinforce the internal dampeners enough that we should not see anything above 5 Gs inside the station anymore. Outside is still a nightmare, but hey, one crisis at a time, right? Velcris tried to process what he had just witnessed. The human had crossed multiple decks, rescued crew members, repaired critical systems, and prevented a reactor breach, all while being crushed under gravitational forces that should have liquefied his internal organs. How? Velcris whispered to Philaxis, who was staring at the monitors with all 6 eyes wide. How is this possible? Commander, came Jackson's voice over the comm, slightly strained but still carrying that absurd casual tone. I am going to do a sweep of the other decks, see who else needs help. If anyone is listening and can move, get to the core sections. If you cannot move, stay put and try not to die. I will get to you. Oh, and someone should probably check the external sensors, because I am pretty sure this storm is not done with us yet. The gravity fluctuated to 5.4. Through the monitors, Velcris watched Jackson stumble, catch himself on a wall, and keep moving. Seriously though, Jackson added, this is like a Tuesday back home. You guys should see Earth during hurricane season. Now that is exciting. Or tornado season. Or earthquake season. Or wildfire season. Actually, Earth just kind of has a lot of seasons where nature tries to murder you, builds character. Velcris felt his entire worldview shifting. He had dismissed humans as reckless newcomers, barely evolved enough to join galactic civilization. But now, watching this one human casually operate in conditions that were killing everyone else, he understood something terrifying. Humans were not reckless. They were not stupid. They were from a death world so brutal that this gravitational nightmare actually felt normal to them. What kind of planet does that to a species? Phylaxis whispered, echoing Velcris's thoughts exactly. Jackson's laugh came through the calm, slightly breathless. Oh, Doc, you have no idea. Earth is not trying to kill us, it is just enthusiastic about keeping us on our toes. You want to know the fun part? 1 gravity is our rest state. This is just a workout. A workout. The human called surviving 8 gravities a workout. Velcris realized with crystal clarity that humanity was not going to just join the Galactic Union. They were going to redefine what everyone thought was possible, assuming any of them survived long enough to tell anyone about it. The gravitational storm lasted 6 hours. 6 hours of chaos, of gravity waves pounding the station like a ship in an ocean squall, of crew members clinging to life while Jackson Reed moved through it all like some kind of indestructible machine. When it finally ended, when the neutron cluster settled back into its normal configuration and the gravitational readings returned to baseline, Pinnacle 7 looked like it had gone through a war. Velcris pulled himself through the corridors toward the operations hub, his body screaming in protest. 2 of his arms were broken, his carapace had multiple fractures, and Dr. Phylaxis had informed him that he had internal bleeding in 3 separate organ clusters. He should have been in medical stasis, but he was the commander, and he needed to see the damage for himself. What he found was somehow both worse and better than he expected. 47 crew members, 19 dead, mostly from the initial gravity spikes before Jackson had stabilized the reactor. 15 in critical condition. The remaining 13, including himself, were ambulatory but injured. The station itself had held together barely, and only because 1 human had managed to do the impossible. Jackson was in the operations hub, still working, running diagnostics on every system. He looked exhausted, his clothing soaked with sweat, his face pale, but he was still moving, still functioning, while everyone else who could stand was barely managing to stay conscious. Report, Velcris said, settling into his command chair with a pained click of his mandibles. Could be worse, Jackson said, not looking up from his console. Hull integrity is at 72%. We have got breaches on decks 4 and 6, but they are sealed. Life support is running at 60% capacity, which is fine since we lost. Sorry, Commander. Since we have fewer crew members now, reactor is stable. We can limp back to the nearest station if we leave in the next 12 hours. 19 dead. 19 beings who had woken up this morning expecting a normal day of research and were now gone. Velcris felt the weight of it settle on his already damaged carapace. You saved 28 crew members, Velcris said quietly. Phylaxis confirmed it. 28 beings who would have died if you had not been able to move during the high-gravity peaks. Jackson finally looked up, and for the first time, Velcris saw something other than casual humor in the human's expression. Grief, maybe. Exhaustion, definitely. I wish I could have saved more. You should not have been able to save any, Velcris said. You should have been as incapacitated as the rest of us. 8.3 gravities should have killed you. It would have killed any other species I know of. But you kept moving. How? Jackson leaned back in his chair, rubbed his face with both hands. Earth is 1 standard gravity, Commander. I have been living in 1G my entire life. My bones are dense. My muscles are built for it. My cardiovascular system is designed to pump blood against that constant pull. When you guys cranked it up to 8, yeah, that sucked, don't get me wrong, but it was survivable for short periods. Humans can actually handle up to 5 or 6 Gs for extended periods if we are trained for it. Fighter pilots back home do it regularly. Regularly. Velcris repeated, his translator somehow making the word sound even more absurd. You intentionally subject yourselves to that. Well, yeah, Jackson said with a tired shrug. How else are you going to do high-speed atmospheric maneuvers? Earth's atmosphere is pretty thick, lots of drag, lots of force. You want to fly fast, you have to deal with the jet. Velcris felt something click in his mind. Your atmosphere. How dense is your atmosphere? About 100 kilopascals at sea level, Jackson said. Why? 100 kilopascals. Velcris's homeworld had 40. Most Galactic Union species came from worlds with between 30 and 60. 100 it was crushing. And your weather, Velcris said slowly. You mentioned hurricanes. What is a hurricane? Jackson actually laughed, though it sounded pained. Oh man, where do I start? Okay, so a hurricane is basically a giant rotating storm system with wind speeds up to 300 kilometers per hour, with storm surges that can flood entire coastal cities, and they can last for weeks. We get a dozen or so every year in certain regions. Then there are tornadoes, which are like smaller, angrier versions with wind speeds up to 500 kilometers per hour. Earthquakes happen when tectonic plates shift. Whole cities can collapse. Volcanoes explode and cover everything in ash and lava. Tsunamis are these massive waves that, you know what, Earth just really likes to keep us on our toes. Velcris stared at him. And your species survived this, thrived in this. We did not have much choice, Jackson said. It was adapt or die. And humans are really, really good at adapting. We are persistence predators, Commander. We do not give up. Ever. It is kind of our thing. We will chase prey for days until it collapses from exhaustion. We will survive in deserts, in frozen tundras, in jungles, on mountains. We will build cities in places that actively try to kill us, and then act surprised when bad things happen. It is honestly kind of stupid when you think about it, but it has also made us pretty hard to kill. A death world. Humans came from an actual death world, and they had not just survived it, they had conquered it. They had turned a planet of constant danger into their home, and then they had decided that was not enough challenge, so they went to space. You are terrifying, Velcris said, and he meant it as a compliment. Jackson grinned. That flat-toothed human grin that Velcris was starting to understand was not threatening at all. It was just human. Thanks, Commander. You are pretty tough yourself, you know. Most beings would have died from those injuries. You are still giving orders. Before Velcris could respond, an alarm started blaring. A different alarm, higher pitched, coming from the navigation systems. Jackson closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and stood up. He walked over to the emergency supply locker, pulled out a ration pack that passed for human coffee, tore it open, and took a long drink of the cold, bitter liquid. Here we go again, he sighed, walking back to his console to check the new crisis. Velcris watched him go and realized something profound. He had spent 12 cycles believing he understood the galaxy, understood the limits of biology and physics and what was possible, but humans had just rewritten all of that in 6 hours. And somehow, despite everything, despite the death and damage and horror, Velcris felt something he had not expected to feel. He felt lucky. Lucky that when the universe had decided to try to kill them all, they had happened to have a human on board, even if that human did consider 8 gravities to be just a particularly enthusiastic Tuesday. 3 weeks after the gravity storm, Research Station Pinnacle 7 was operational again. Barely. The repairs were ongoing. The crew was still recovering, and Central Command had sent a team of investigators to figure out what had gone so catastrophically wrong and, more importantly, how anyone had survived. Velcris floated through the rebuilt operations hub, his broken arms now in regeneration casts, and watched the investigators interview Jackson for the 5th time that day. The human looked tired of explaining himself, but he answered every question with the same patient tone he used for everything. So you are saying you carried Chief Engineer Vorn through 6.7 gravities while simultaneously monitoring reactor output on your portable console? The lead investigator, a Prithian named Quilnor, sounded deeply skeptical. Her species came from a gas giant's moon and could barely tolerate 0.3 gravities without mechanical assistance. Yeah, that is what I am saying, because that is what happened, Jackson replied, scratching the back of his neck in that gesture Velcris had learned meant the human was annoyed but trying not to show it. Look, I know it sounds impossible from your perspective, but from mine it was just necessary. You do what you have to do. Quilnor made a notation on her datapad. Central Command is having difficulty accepting that any biological entity could function in those conditions. Then Central Command needs to update its database, Jackson said flatly. Because I did it, and I have got the strained muscles and bruised everything to prove it. Velcris cleared his throat, drawing Quilnor's attention. Investigator, perhaps you should focus less on whether it was possible and more on the fact that it happened. Without Jackson Reed, this station would have suffered total crew loss. That is not speculation. That is documented fact. Quilnor's antennae twitched in what might have been irritation, but she nodded. Very well, Commander. I will include your assessment in my report. After the investigator left, Jackson slumped in his chair and let out a long breath. I feel like I am some kind of science experiment now. Everyone keeps staring at me. You are aware that you have fundamentally changed how the entire station operates, correct? Velcris said, moving closer. We have revised every emergency protocol. High-gravity refuge points are now designated as human work zones. Equipment maintenance schedules have been reorganized around your capabilities. 3 different research teams have requested transfers here specifically to study human physiology in extreme conditions. Jackson grimaced. Yeah. I noticed. It is weird, man. Half the crew treats me like I am going to suddenly Hulk out and throw them across the room, and the other half acts like I am made of solid titanium. I am just a maintenance engineer from Seattle. You are a maintenance engineer from Seattle who survived 8.3 gravities and saved 28 lives, Velcris corrected. There is a difference. Over the past 3 weeks, Velcris had filed 7 reports with Central Command. 7 detailed, thorough reports explaining exactly why humans needed to be recruited for high-risk installations across the Galactic Union, deep space stations near gravitational anomalies, mining operations on high-gravity worlds, emergency response teams for stellar disasters. Anywhere that conditions might exceed what typical species could survive, humans would be invaluable. The response from Central Command had been interesting. Apparently, humanity's application to join the Union had been viewed as a courtesy admission, a way to welcome a new spacefaring species without expecting much contribution. They were reconsidering that assessment now. I am recommending that every high-risk station be required to have at least 1 human crew member, Velcris said. I am also recommending that human physical capabilities be classified as a strategic resource. You may find yourself very popular in the coming cycles. Jackson laughed, but it sounded hollow. Great, just what I always wanted, to be popular because I am harder to kill than everyone else. He stood up and walked to the observation window, looking out at the neutron cluster. It was stable now. Beautiful even. Stars bending around impossible density. You know what is funny, Commander? I miss Earth. I actually miss 1 full gravity. Point 4 feels like I am going to float away any second. Everything here is so light, so delicate. Back home, things have weight, you know. Literal and metaphorical, things matter because they are hard. Velcris joined him at the window, understanding for the first time what Jackson meant. Earth had not just built strong bodies, it had built strong minds. It had created a species that valued resilience because they had no choice, that kept moving because stopping meant death. You are homesick for a planet that actively tries to kill you, Velcris observed. Yeah, Jackson said with a small smile. Funny how that works, right? You grow up somewhere, you adapt to it, and then everywhere else just feels wrong. Too easy, like the universe is not trying hard enough. An alarm chimed, soft and polite. Just a routine system check, nothing urgent, but Jackson still tensed, still turned toward it with that immediate readiness that Velcris now recognized as a survival instinct honed by millions of years of evolution on a world that did not forgive mistakes. Then Jackson relaxed and laughed at himself. See? Can't even handle a normal alarm anymore without expecting disaster. I am going to be so paranoid when I finally rotate back home. If you rotate back home, Velcris said carefully, your contract with the Union can be extended. Given your performance, I suspect you will receive numerous offers. Jackson was quiet for a moment, considering. Maybe. I don't know, Commander. I signed up for this because I wanted to see the galaxy, meet alien species, do something that mattered. I did not sign up to be the guy everyone calls when things go sideways, and yet, Velcris said, that is exactly who you are. Jackson did not respond, just kept staring out at the stars. Velcris left him there, floating back to his command station to finish the day's reports. As he worked, Velcris thought about everything he had learned in the past 3 weeks. About assumptions, about dismissing beings before understanding them, about how the universe had a way of humbling even the most experienced commanders. He had thought humans were a joke, barely evolved primates who had stumbled into space travel through sheer reckless luck. He had been so catastrophically wrong that it was almost embarrassing. Humans were not lucky. They were not reckless. They were the product of a world so harsh, so unforgiving, that they had become something unprecedented in the galactic community. They were survivors in the truest sense, beings who simply refused to die no matter what the universe threw at them, and Velcris would never ever underestimate them again. Across the operations hub, Jackson Reed finished his coffee, stretched his shoulders with a series of pops that made nearby crew members flinch, and got back to work. Just another day for the human from Earth, where 8 gravities was just an unusually difficult Tuesday, and surviving the impossible was simply what you did, because on Earth, apparently you did not get the luxury of giving up. You just kept going, always. And that, Velcris realized, was the most terrifying and impressive thing about humans he had learned. They always kept going.